The storm didn't roll in polite or slow. Nah, it came in hot and sideways, like it had beef with the whole damn mountain. 1 minute the sky was that dull steel gray ranchers know too well. The next it was pure chaos, snow flying like fists, wind screaming like it had something to prove. That's when she showed up. Out of nowhere. A stranger in the middle of a whiteout, knocking on the door of a cabin that barely showed up on most maps. The cowboy. Let's call him Jake, had been riding solo for years. Lone wolf type. The kind of guy who trusted his horse more than people and liked it that way. His cabin sat miles from town, tucked up against a ridge, built sturdy but simple. Wood stove. 1 table. 1 bed. No room for company, especially not in the middle of a full-blown blizzard. So when he heard that knock, his first thought wasn't romance, it was trouble. He opens the door and there she is. Snow-packed hair, cheeks red as hell, coat too thin for this kind of weather. She's shaking, but not crying. Not begging either. Just standing there, jaw set, eyes sharp, like she refused to let the storm see her scared. Right off the bat, that caught his attention. Most folks would have been losing their minds. She wasn't. The first few minutes inside were awkward as all get out. He hands her a blanket like it's a peace offering. She nods stiff, barely says thanks. They don't know each other's names yet, and the silence sits thick between them, broken only by the wind slamming the walls like it's trying to bust in. Jake keeps his distance, leaning against the counter, watching her like she might vanish if he blinks. She keeps her hands close to the fire, but her eyes keep drifting around the cabin, taking everything in. Not nosy, observant. That's when survival mode kicks in. Storm like this? Ain't nobody going anywhere. Roads are gone. Visibility's trash. They're stuck, whether they like it or not. Jake starts doing what he does best, handling business. He checks the stove, counts supplies, makes coffee strong enough to wake the dead. He offers her a mug. She takes it, both hands wrapped around it like it's the best thing she's touched in weeks. When she finally talks, her voice is steady but soft. No dramatic backstory dump. Just short answers. Careful ones dot as the hours drag on. The cold outside pushes them closer inside. Not physically at first, but emotionally. The kind of closeness you don't plan. They share a pot of beans. Not fancy, but hot. She cracks a small smile at that, says something dry about how it beats freezing to death. Jake laughs before he can stop himself, and that surprises both of them. The tension eases a notch. Little things start slipping through the cracks. She fixes a tear in her glove with thread pulled from her coat lining neat, practiced, like she's done it 100 times. She hums under her breath while the wind howls, some old tune that don't sound like it came from the radio. Jake notices she asks smart questions about the land, about the horses, about the weather patterns. Not tourist stuff. Real questions. The kind folks only ask when they've lived rough themselves. That's where the intrigue sneaks in. She ain't just some lost drifter. There's depth there. Wait. When Jake mentions town, her jaw tightens for half a second so fast most folks wouldn't catch it. But he does. When he offers the bed and says he'll take the chair, she doesn't argue, but she doesn't look relieved either. Like she's used to sleeping light. Like comfort isn't something she expects. By nightfall, the storm is still raging, but inside the cabin it's different. Warm. Not just from the fire, but from the shared quiet. 2 strangers, stuck in the same mess, learning each other without meaning to. No big confessions yet. No romance fireworks. Just that low, steady hum of something starting. Something unexpected. And as the snow keeps piling up outside, the audience can feel it. This shelter isn't just saving them from the cold. It's about to change both their lives, Asterisk by day 2, the blizzard wasn't just a storm anymore, it was a full-on lock-in. Snow stacked so high against the cabin walls it looked like the place had been swallowed whole. Time stopped making sense. Morning, afternoon, night didn't matter. The world outside was on mute, and inside that little homestead, something different started growing. They slipped into a routine without even talking about it. Jake chopped wood, same as always, muscles burning, breath fogging the air when he cracked the door. He knew her name was Clara, handled the inside like she'd been there forever. Swept the floor. Kept the coffee going. Learned the rhythm of the stove so it didn't smoke them out. No awkward asking, no power struggle. Just teamwork. That kind that only happens when both folks have survived some stuff and don't need to prove anything. Days blurred together, and the tension that first day had melted clean away. They laughed more than either of them expected. Real laughs, too. Not polite chuckles. Jake busted up when Clara tried to flip a skillet pancake and sent it straight into the fire. She laughed till she snorted when his horse spooked at his own shadow outside the window. The cabin, once quiet as a grave, started to sound alive, warm. Human. With the laughs came the talking. Long talks. The kind that happen when there's nowhere else to be and nothing else to distract you. Jake talked about the land, how it didn't care who you were or where you came from, it just demanded respect. He liked things simple. Honest work. Honest days. Clara listened. Really listened, like his words mattered. When she spoke, her world sounded different. Cities, moving around. People stacked on top of people. She talked about chasing opportunity, about never staying long enough to grow roots. Jake didn't get that at first. To him, leaving felt like quitting. They butted heads a little over it. Nothing heated, just different angles. Jake thought freedom came from knowing every inch of your land, from staying put. Clara thought freedom was knowing you could walk away any time and still land on your feet. On paper, they were opposites. But the more they talked, the clearer it got they were both chasing the same thing. Control over their own lives. Peace. A place where they didn't have to pretend. That's where the vulnerability crept in. Not in big dramatic speeches, but in quiet confessions. Jake admitted he liked the silence because it didn't ask questions. Clara confessed she talked so much because silence reminded her of things she'd rather forget. One night, the fire burned low, and she rolled up her sleeve without thinking, revealing a faint scar. Jake didn't ask. She noticed him notice, and instead of pulling away, she shrugged and said, "Life gets rough sometimes." That was it. But it said everything. The air between them changed after that. Subtle, electric. They started noticing small things, how close they stood when passing in the kitchen, how their hands brushed and neither rushed to move away. Jake caught himself watching the way Clara smiled when she read an old paperback he kept around, her feet tucked under her like she belonged there. Clara noticed how gentle he was fixing a cracked chair, big hands careful as hell. It messed with both of them. Neither said anything about it. They didn't need to. The tension was there, humming under every shared glance. When they played cards at the table, their knees bumped and stayed that way. When Jake came in from the cold, Clara would hand him a towel, fingers lingering just a beat too long. It wasn't about the storm anymore. This wasn't cabin fever. This was something deeper, scarier. They both knew it couldn't just be circumstance. Feelings like this didn't come out of nowhere. They came from being seen, from laughing at dumb stuff, from sharing meals and stories in silence, from realizing that someone else understood you in ways you didn't even have words for yet. The homestead had turned into more than shelter. It became a space where walls came down, where two very different lives crossed paths and fit together easier than either of them expected. And as the storm outside showed no signs of letting up, one thing was clear: The real weather was brewing right there between them, promising something warm, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. The storm didn't end with a bang. It ended with a hush. One morning, Jake woke up and the world felt quiet. No wind screaming like a banshee. No snow slamming the walls. Just stillness. The kind that makes your ears ring. He pushed the door open, half expecting the blizzard to take another swing at him, but instead, sunlight spilled across the snow like it had been waiting its turn. The land stretched out clean and white. Untouched, shining like a whole new world had been dropped right where the old one used to be. Snow-covered pines, frozen creek glittering like glass. It was beautiful as hell, peaceful, and for a split second, Jake thought maybe, just maybe, this was it. The storm had passed. Life could settle back into something simple again. Then he saw them. Down the ridge, cutting through the snow like they belonged there, came a line of figures. Horses first. Big, expensive-looking animals, the kind that didn't come from some dusty local stable. Then men in clean coats, moving with purpose. A couple of trucks parked farther down where the road finally showed itself again. Engines idling like they'd been waiting for a signal. Jake's gut dropped. Clara stepped up beside him, wrapped in his spare coat. Same coat she'd been wearing while laughing over burnt pancakes. Same woman who'd sat cross-legged on his floor, reading his old books, sharing pieces of herself in the quiet hours of the storm. But when she saw them, something in her posture changed. Her shoulders straightened. Her chin lifted. The softness didn't vanish, but it sharpened. "That's them," she said quietly, before Jake could ask who the hell them was. The first rider dismounted and headed their way, calling her name like it carried weight, respect, relief. Another followed, and another. Suddenly the cabin felt small again, like it was shrinking around him. Clara stepped forward, slipping out of the borrowed coat and handing it back to Jake. The gesture was gentle, but it hit him hard. She thanked him formally this time, not the easy, relaxed tone she'd used all week. This was different. Controlled, the kind of voice people used when they were used to being listened to. The men addressed her like she mattered, like she wasn't just some traveler who'd gotten caught in a storm. One opened a door for her. Another offered gloves that looked brand new. Someone mentioned meetings, schedules, security. Words that didn't belong in Jake's world. Words that didn't belong in his cabin. And then it clicked. This wasn't some lost woman chasing opportunity. This was someone who owned opportunities. Someone with money, power, the kind that came with people waiting on you in blizzards, instead of giving up and heading home. Jake stood there, boots planted in the snow, feeling like the ground had shifted under him. He watched Clara move among them, answering questions, giving quiet instructions, confident, effortless. She wasn't pretending anymore because she didn't have to. The woman he'd shared silence with hadn't been fake, but she'd been incomplete. Carefully tucked away, his chest tightened. Not with anger, with something worse. Doubt. All those nights by the fire. The laughter. The almost touching. The things they didn't say but both felt. Were those real? Or had he just been a warm place to hide from the storm? Clara looked back at him then. Really looked. And in her eyes, he saw it: conflict, regret, something like fear. She walked back over, boots crunching in the snow, and for a second it was just them again. "I didn't lie," she said softly. "I just didn't tell all of it." Jake nodded because his throat wouldn't work. He believed her. That was the messed up part. He believed every word she'd said in that cabin. But belief didn't change the facts standing behind her now. She belonged to a world of chauffeurs and plans and safety nets. He belonged to a place where you fixed your own chair and prayed the winter didn't kill you. Those worlds didn't touch. They barely waved at each other in passing Dot as her entourage waited. Jake felt the distance stretch between them, even though they were standing only a few feet apart. The storm had trapped them together, stripped everything down to two souls and a fire. Now the sun had come out, and with it, reality. When Clara finally turned to leave, Jake didn't stop her. He couldn't. He watched her walk away, each step carrying her further from the man who'd known her when she was just Clara. Not wealth and titles and expectation. The storm had revealed the land in all its beauty. But it had also revealed the truth. And standing there in the quiet, Jake knew this was the hardest kind of weather, one you can't see coming. And sure as hell can't hide from. Asterisk once the snow settled and the engines faded off down the mountain. The quiet came back, but it didn't feel warm anymore. It felt heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. Jake stood outside the cabin long after Clara and her crew disappeared, staring at the ruts in the snow where fancy tires had cut through his world. That right there said it all. Two paths. Two lives. Not built to run side by side. When Clara came back later that day alone this time, telling her people to wait at the edge of the property, the air between them was tight as a drawn wire. She looked the same, but different, cleaner, sharper, like the storm had scrubbed her down and revealed who she really was to everyone else. To Jake, though, she was still the woman who laughed at burnt pancakes and stayed up late talking about nothing and everything. But the weight of her wealth? That was new. And it hung between them like a loaded question. She tried to explain. Not with numbers or bragging. Clara wasn't built that way, but with truth. Family money. Old money. The kind that comes with strings attached thicker than barbed wire. Boards and investors. Expectations about where she lived, who she was seen with, how she showed up in the world. Jake listened, arms crossed, jaw tight. Not because he didn't care, but because every word pushed them further apart. His life was simple by choice. No bosses, no meetings. No suits waiting on him to behave. He fixed what broke. Fed what needed feeding. Slept when the sun went down. Her life sounded like a cage lined with gold. Pretty from the outside. Heavy as hell on the inside. That's where the clash really hit. Jake couldn't picture himself at her side in that world. Didn't want to be some novelty cowboy people whispered about over wine glasses. Didn't want to owe anyone a damn thing. Clara felt that hesitation like a punch. Because she didn't want to drag him into that mess, but she also couldn't walk away from everything she'd been born into. Not without blowing up lives way bigger than her own. They talked it out, raw and honest. No yelling. No drama. Just truth laid bare. Jake admitted he was scared not of her, but of losing himself. Clara admitted she was tired of being handled like an asset instead of a human being. For the first time, the gap between them wasn't about money. It was about pressure. About how the world decided who you were before you ever got a say. Society didn't help. Jake knew how folks talked. A rich woman slumming it with a rancher? That kind of story didn't end gentle. Clara knew it too. She'd lived her whole life under a microscope, every move judged, every relationship analyzed for value. Loving someone like Jake wouldn't just be frowned on, it'd be challenged, questioned, possibly crushed. And yet, there they were, standing in that rough little cabin that had seen them at their most real. No titles, no bank accounts. Just two people who'd shared something rare. Something clean. Jake remembered how easy it had been with her when the world was snowed out. How right it felt. Clara remembered how safe she'd been there, not because of security teams or money, but because someone cared without expecting anything back. The question hung thick in the air. Was that enough? Jake looked at her and realized affection like this didn't come with instructions. It didn't care about zip codes or net worth, but it did demand courage. The kind that meant standing your ground when the world told you to stay in your lane. Clara realized the same thing. Loving Jake meant choosing, possibly for the first time in her life, what she wanted over what was expected. They didn't have answers yet. No neat solution. Just a shared understanding that whatever came next wouldn't be easy. Wealth had weight, heavy enough to bend people, break them, or, if handled right, force them to decide who they really were. As they stood there, fingers brushing but not quite holding, one thing was clear: the distance between their worlds was real. But so was what they felt. And the real question wasn't whether love could cross that gap, it was whether they were brave enough to try. The choice didn't come crashing down all at once. It crept in slow, like frost seeping through boots you swore were good enough. Clara stood at the edge of Jake's land, staring out at the wide-open stretch where the mountains met the sky, knowing damn well she was standing between two lives, and only one of them could be hers. On one side was everything she'd been raised to protect: the money, the influence, the safety net stacked so high she'd never really known what free fall felt like. That life came with clean lines, locked schedules, and people who smiled while calculating what you were worth to them. It was polished, powerful, and suffocating in a way she'd never had the guts to say out loud until now. On the other side was Jake, his cabin, the smell of wood smoke, mornings that started with real work and ended with quiet pride. No spotlight, no armor, just truth, plain and sometimes rough, but always honest. Choosing him didn't mean trading one man for another, it meant choosing uncertainty. A life without guarantees. A life where love didn't come backed by contracts or protection that scared the hell out of her. Jake wasn't exactly sleeping easy either. He'd spent his whole life standing on his own 2 feet, and pride was stitched into him like muscle memory. He didn't ask for help, didn't owe favors. And the idea of loving someone whose world could swallow him whole? That rattled him. Bad. Part of him wanted to push Clara away just to protect what he'd built: his independence, his identity, his damn peace. But then he'd remember the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Like he was enough, just as he was. No upgrades needed. That messed with him more than anything. They finally talked it out on the porch, the sun dipping low, painting everything gold like it was trying to make the moment prettier than it felt. Clara laid it all on the table. No filters. No soft edges. She told him choosing him might mean walking away from power she'd never get back, from a life people would kill to have. Jake listened, fists clenched, knowing that if he said the wrong thing, he'd either cage her or lose her dot, so he did the hardest thing a proud man can do. He told her the truth. He told her he loved her, but he wouldn't be the reason she hated her own life, wouldn't be her escape hatch or her rebellion. If she stayed, it had to be because this life meant something to her too, not because she was running from another one. And if she left, it would hurt like hell, but he'd survive. He always had. That cracked something open in her dot because for the first time, someone wasn't trying to pull her toward a choice. He was letting her choose. Really choose. No pressure. No guilt. Just honesty. Clara realized then that privilege had always decided for her. Where she went. Who she dated. What kind of future made sense. But love? Real love didn't shove. It stood still and waited. When she finally spoke, her voice shook, but she didn't back down. She said she was tired of living a life that looked good from the outside, but felt empty when the doors closed. Tired of measuring her worth in numbers and expectations. She didn't want perfection. She wanted presence. She wanted mornings that felt real and nights that didn't require pretending. Jake swallowed hard. Loving her meant risking himself. Letting go of the idea that needing someone made you weak. That staying meant losing ground. Maybe love wasn't about guarding your pride like a fortress. Maybe it was about laying it down and seeing what survived. The resolution didn't come with fireworks or applause. No dramatic music cue. Just two people standing face to face, choosing each other without knowing exactly how it would work. And that's the part that hit hardest, because it forced the question on anyone watching. What really matters? Is it status, the armor, the safety, the image? Or is it connection, the messy, terrifying, beautiful thing that asks you to show up as you are? Frontier love doesn't promise easy. It promises real. And in the end, that choice between what looks impressive and what feels true is the one that defines who you are when the storm clears and nobody's watching anymore.